You're looking at me. I'm right here. I'm Jon Caldara. Welcome. I'm the president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. That not-so-smart lady next to me is Michelle Sie Whitten. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, now, I've been so looking forward to this because we do a lot of politics. This is purely personal. This is an indulgence for me, an indulgence. And I've got a very special man in my life, and it's my son, my 8-year-old Chance. And he's been quite a challenge. He has Down syndrome, which is something I knew nothing about until about 8 years ago, and it's been a challenge. It's been a heck of a challenge, but he is the coolest guy I know. He's like, I get to live with John Belushi now. He's just he's a crazed man, but I've never met a man so much in the moment. And it's taken me a while to understand what this was. I got to tell you, it was not easy at first, and it was hard for me to accept, and I'm getting there. Talk to me a little bit. What is Down syndrome? And then I want to hear a little bit about your story.
Oh, sure. Well, Down syndrome is technically 3 copies of chromosome 21 instead of 2. So somebody is just born with a little extra of something. But the result is that sometimes there are delays cognitively, sometimes there are delays physically, and there are some challenges associated with those delays.
You make that sound so soft and wonderful. let me put it in different terms that aren't so politically correct. This is what we used to be referred to as mentally retarded and physically retarded. That this extra
I've never heard the physical one. All right, but that's a new vocabulary word for me. Okay.
It's been a challenge because these are mental and physical issues, and kids with Downs and adults with Downs have all sorts of physical problems. My son is 8 years old, and he's gone through now 10 operations.
That's a lot.
And it's a lot. A lot of little minor things. 3 weeks old, he had open heart surgery. And this was a tough thing to understand. And it wasn't that long ago that kids like my son were consigned to some institution somewhere instead of being treated like human beings. And this is a whole different world. You're very involved. You're the executive director of the Global Down Syndrome Foundation, which is doing remarkable stuff that I want to get into, but I want to hear your story.
Sure, and before I do that, my personal story, that whole question about what is Down syndrome, you can't answer it. It's like saying, what is it to be a boy? Or what is it to be a girl? I mean, like, you can't know ahead of time what a child will be. And because it's a spectrum condition, there are people, and not many, but there are people with Down syndrome who are in the completely typical normal IQ. And then there's some that are nonverbal. And then there's everybody in between. And there are all sorts of abilities. And there are lots of people with Down syndrome who never have an operation their entire life and live till they're 70. So, what is it? It's very hard to say what it is because there's such a huge spectrum. For me, I had a diagnosis before I gave birth to my first child. Her name's Sophia, and I had a kind of a rating, a statistical rating saying, oh, your child has a 1 in 9 chance of having Down syndrome. I was like, lottery.
Oh, really? You were that happy about it?
No.
Because I got to tell you, I was pretty freaked out by it.
I was devastated. So I talked to my doctor, and I was going to get an amnio. And I did get an amnio, and Tom, my husband, and I weren't really prepared for what we were about to experience. So we went into the doctor's office, and the amnio doctor wasn't there. There was a genetic counselor who came in and said, Mr. and Mrs. Whitten, we're going to show you a video. And we're like, okay, I make videos, so I was like, oh, I'm going to watch a video. And the video said, and I kind of remember it very clearly, although I don't remember the numbers, it said, there's an X% chance that your baby's going to die in utero, a Y% chance that your baby's going to die before 1, a Z% chance that your baby's going to die before 3.
Is this when you knew?
No, this is before I got the amnio test.
So you didn't even know that Sophie had Downs at this point?
No. Okay. And then if your baby lives past 3, then your baby has a good chance of having all these medical issues. And all these medical issues started flowing up. And then the genetic counselor came in and said, Mrs. Whitten, please don't cry. 80 to 90% of people terminate. You can too. And then she gave me this awful book of testimonials of people who get photos with their fetuses to get closure on their termination. And yeah, I can understand that in some very unique situations, but I was 18 weeks pregnant and I thought that was really repugnant. So then I went in to get my amnio test, and I knew within 2 seconds of the doctor opening his mouth that his voice was the voiceover on the video. It was a low production quality video, and he made it, and it was full of inaccurate information. When my husband and I went back home and we Googled Down syndrome, it was very clear that the life expectancy is not 3. The life expectancy today of a person with Down syndrome is 60. So I felt like we were given really false information, and although I'm personally pro-choice, our choice was to keep Sophia, and we never looked back. But we were very disturbed about the information we were given. And then other studies that we looked at, including a 2003 study, show that we're not alone, that the majority of people who are given the prenatal diagnosis, as well as the postnatal, by the way, are told horrible, inaccurate things at that moment.
Although there's still a lot of truth to those horrible things, and that you're going to have a child who has a genetic condition. This genetic condition will mean that he will have some real challenges physically and some real challenges mentally. And as could. Well, I can only speak for my own.
Yes.
My son is not verbal yet. We have a great conversation, but other people don't quite get it yet.
Do you allow him to speak?
When he says something I don't like, I just give him a little backhand. He's really
Italians talk a lot. So it's like,
no, actually, he communicates really well. He's communicating better and better. He understands so much. You can tell he's hearing and understanding, but the words he thinks he's saying, most people don't understand.
Sure.
But there is this wild spectrum of functionality. And now that I'm tuned into the world, and I've got to tell you, 8 years ago, I was not tuned into this world. I was living in complete denial, angry, very, very angry about the situation.
Right.
And now I've got this little man that I just love, but he's a handful.
Sure.
And I worry about his future. I worry about his condition. Tell me about your daughter. What's she like?
She's great. She's really precocious.
You actually like her?
Yeah, I do. I do. And she has a little brother who's typical, and he's always like, "What about me? You can't forget me," because she gets a lot of attention.
My daughter's screaming, "You don't make Chance read a book." It's like, well, he can't read a book. Now go back and do your homework.
Exactly. But no, it's really worked out well. I mean, she's included fully in her school. She's doing well in the school. We do have challenges. I mean, we struggle with her academics and getting it right. But we can get it right. It just takes more effort. Having said that, I have a brother who was kind of on the other end of the spectrum, and it took a lot of effort to get him right, too. Anybody who's different, no matter what spectrum you're on, it's going to take more effort, and they're all you don't have to have an extra copy of chromosome 21 to have challenges in school. I mean, face it, think about all your friends or even your own experience in school and what a little extra help, what a good teacher would have done.
You optimist. Everything is good. Everything is wonderful.
Is good.
No. I'm a Republican. Let me bring you down to the pessimistic part of this, all right? I'm looking at a son that might not live as long as I'm going to live. I lost a daughter to cancer, and I simply cannot bear the thought of losing another child. So I worry so much about this. I worry about his acceptance in the world. I worry that he's going to be able to function at least somewhat independently. I worry that he's going to be victimized because he will be an easy target to be bullied. He'll be an easy target to be made a victim. So you can be as happy as you like. I'm a single dad, and I'm worried and I'm scared.
Yeah. Well, I'm half Italian, so I'm paranoid.
So you're there. Okay.
And I worry about everything. I have a mother who's Italian, so I worry about everything. And
so then let me say, lucky father.
Yeah. Oh no.
Well, not good Italian.
But no, it is challenging. But it's again for everything. I mean, I grew up as a daughter of 2 immigrants. And so I was very aware of racial prejudice. And, I grew up as a girl, and I was very aware about gender differences. And, you hear some statistics like, 1 in 5 women will be raped in the U.S., like these horrible statistics, but you're not like, oh my God, I have a girl, I'm going to like worry every single day of my life
that's
about
exactly
that
what I
statistic.
do. That's exactly what I do.
But people like you and I do that. And that is true. So I worry about Sophia's safety, but Patrick's only 6 years old. I worry about his safety because any kid can be taken advantage of with, what is it, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, the guy with the lollipop?
Yeah.
I mean, they'll take him anywhere. Candy, my son likes candy. So, I mean, there is worry. I think that for parents of kids with Down syndrome today, there's the good news, bad news. The good news is that opposed to the 1980s when the lifespan of a person was 28, the lifespan of a person with Down syndrome today is 60. The bad news is that they have a higher chance of having Alzheimer's because there's a huge link there, and
because they're living
of the
longer.
triplication of certain genes. Oh yeah, because they're living longer, they've discovered this amazing overlap of the number of people who have Down syndrome who get Alzheimer's.
Well, great. Now I have one more thing to worry about.
Yes, one more thing to worry about. And also, we worry about our kids outliving us for the first generation. This is the first generation of parents of kids with Down syndrome where we can expect our kids to outlive us. And are they going to then be institutionalized? Do you have family members you trust? Where will this child be? Will the siblings step up? Do you want to put that pressure on your sibling? Or on their sibling. So there are concerns and issues, clearly. A lot of people in life go through life having those concerns and issues. They just don't have it as early as we do. It could be the kid's a little bit older, and then you're like, oh, well, little daughter is not as capable as big son, and you start worrying about after you're gone, and it has nothing to do with a developmental delay or an extra chromosome. It's just that we end up getting it all at once at the diagnosis, at the point of birth, and that's a lot.
How many people have Down syndrome in the United States?
That's a good question. The estimate is that there are about 400,000 in the U.S. and over 6 million worldwide. But there's also something called mosaic Down syndrome, where there's a triplication of some of the genes on chromosome 21, and there are a lot of people like you and I who could be walking around and be partial, and we just don't know it because we've never been checked. It's very interesting.
Talk to me a little bit about one of the reasons you put together this organization, which has just done some incredible work. We have lots of challenges in America, and we've got all sorts of diseases that need to be funded. Research needs to happen. Treatments need to happen. From cancer to heart disease to genetic orders. Tell me a little bit about how much the government puts into our kids for research.
Not a whole lot, unfortunately, which is part of how this whole thing started. We found out when I was pregnant, and then obviously we started researching it more after Sophia was born, that Down syndrome is the least funded genetic condition by our National Institutes of Health.
That's worth repeating. I want this one to...
Sure. So, out of all the diseases and conditions that our National Institutes of Health in Washington, D.C. funds, and they fund 40 billion a year worth of stuff. We are the least funded genetic condition there, and it's really terrible. It's painful.
I mean,
in fact.
it is. Given that if there's 400,000 people like our children, why is it the least funded? And I think I've got some thoughts on it, but you tell me what you think.
And I think that's been happening over about a 10-year period. And so it's not just 1 year in isolation. Right. So compounded, what that means for us is that we don't have good ideas like with autism about how our kids learn in school. And we need that. And we don't have good research to say, oh, what's the Alzheimer's connection? Should there be the same or different kinds of medication? We need that. We need that for the health of our children and adults, and we need that for the behavioral and educational reaching of those potentials for our children and adults. So we feel it's very unfair, and even compared to other differently abled groups, autism, Fragile X, et cetera. Not that they should be funded less, by no way. They should continue to get great funding, but we're funded 3 to 11 times less year on year, even though our populations are huge.
The technology is changing so that you don't have to wait till 18 weeks into pregnancy to find out whether you're carrying a child with Downs. It's getting so that after just a few weeks, you'll be able to have this test to take care of it.
Yes.
Let me be the pessimist again.
Or the devil's advocate.
Or the devil's advocate.
Yes.
Is it that the government says, we solved the problem. With early detection, you can terminate your pregnancy, problem solved.
I don't know. I mean, you'd kind of have to take a survey of the government and expect them to answer all these very complicated questions honestly. I think there are different hypotheses. So, for example, there are some people who think, oh, the lifespan doubled, they're doing so well, we don't need to give them more money. Then there's some other hypotheses that say, well, the defunding of Down syndrome coincided with the first press releases of having an imminent 10-week blood test that will definitively tell you if your baby has Down syndrome. And therefore, like you had kind of hypothesized, oh, well, termination will solve the problem. No matter what the reason for the defunding, it's got to stop. It's wrong from any metrics, and our children need to be invested in. In terms of this test, part of the problem, too, is that as the Down syndrome community, we need to step up, and we need to provide accurate information about Down syndrome to doctors and to any professional working in the area to give them accurate information about Down syndrome. And so that's one of the things that the Global Down Syndrome Foundation has done.
What is the goal of your foundation? What is the Global Down Syndrome Foundation? If you could put it out of business, you put it out of business because you achieved what goal?
Because we achieved eradicating the medical and cognitive ill effects associated with the triplication of that chromosome 21 or Down syndrome. So what that means is you take a person with Down syndrome, this is just one example, you take a person with Down syndrome and you say, okay, well, some of your memory loss issues are very similar to a person with Alzheimer's. And there's a drug that the person with Alzheimer's takes to make sure that their memory stays intact, and that helps your memory. You learn better, you feel better, you don't get Alzheimer's, and instead of perhaps costing the state $60,000 or $70,000 a year, you're actually able to have a job, contribute that money, that type of a scenario. And again, that's a pie in the sky scenario. That's one example of what a breakthrough.
I'm getting the image of
could look like.
Some sort of superhero movie. So are you saying you're going to?
Superpowers
Yeah,
activate.
exactly. You're going to take my kid, put him into some chamber. He's going to yell and scream as the lightning
Yeah.
bolts come out, and then he's going to come out as a typical kid, and he's going to he'll be able to not have physical problems and mental issues.
There are some research organizations that are focused simply on cognition, and that's what they want to do. They want to look at what's going on, and even in utero say, oh, well, let's increase this protein or that protein, and then that baby is born typical. And that's what they're investing in. For our foundation, the Global Down Syndrome Foundation, although we're research and medical care, we're more about post-birth. We're saying, okay, you have this child, how do we allow this child to reach their potential and be safe? All the gains that we've made, have not been, messing with genes per se. It's been with early intervention and therapies and understanding how the child learns. I think that there's still a great inroads to be made in terms of that.
Right, so
but in terms of the
with
memory,
your organization,
sure.
You're helping and you're funding and you're doing some incredible work at Children's Hospital and the Anschutz Medical Center, and it's just amazing. But you are looking for technology. You're looking for medical advances.
Research.
This is the research to find out how you take kids like ours and give them the best shot. That what is it that can help them learn more?
Exactly. And let me give you
is this realistic?
I think so. Like again, given the new technologies, let's just take something simple called sleep apnea. Okay, so that's when you like stop breathing at night, and anything that a person with Down syndrome has, a typical person has too, and there are treatments for that. It's a terrible thing. It kills your ability to think and really act. Think if you're just sleep deprived, how are you going to function in life? And so there are small studies that estimate that 70% of our kids have sleep apnea. If we just had certain guidelines in the American Association of Pediatrics as well for the adults saying that it's mandatory for our kids to get a sleep apnea test, then a lot of the children who have Down syndrome, who are those problem children in school.
When you say mandatory, you're not saying the government's going to force you to take a test,
no,
but your doctor's
going to say. Putting it in the recommendations.
Right.
Your doctor's going to have a checklist that says this is covered by insurance. I mean, that's the key. When I say mandatory, I mean it's covered by insurance. That's what I mean.
And for something like sleep apnea, people have it. They have CPAP machines. They go to bed with a mask on, and it keeps your airwaves open. And my son is trying to learn to live with one of those.
And that's tough for children, But again, do the same things help? CPAP does help. Okay, so how do we get that useful for children with Down syndrome? Because when they're children, two, they might have certain habits in how they sleep. So there are adjustments that can be made even to a CPAP kind of regime that aren't being looked at. Even how many people actually have it and making it something that is reimbursable hasn't been looked at. And you can imagine if we take all the kids with Down syndrome, if 70% is true, and we just address their sleep apnea, they're going to be so much better functioning. So that's a real example of work we can be doing that's medical, but that does affect cognition. It really does. And your ability to function in school.
I don't want to spend too much time on this, but just the other week you put together your wonderful event, which was the first time I've ever been to it.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, so my little man and I, and he's there wearing his little sport coat. Oh man, the women were all over him. It was incredible, and it was a party. You had the governor there, you had Pat Bowen there, and Elway there. This really was a very, I'm going to use the word glamorous, event to raise money for your foundation. Real briefly, what is it? What's the hook on this? Because this was fun. I mean, it was fun.
Yes, it's a fun event. It's the largest fundraiser for people with Down syndrome.
You had an open bar, and guys like me really want to thank you for that.
Yes. Open bar is good, although you have to be safe driving home.
I let my son take care of that.
Yeah, okay,
he was a designated driver.
Yeah, there you go. But I think the key is that our children and our adults with Down syndrome are brilliant and beautiful. And people don't know that. And if you come to our event, you see it because there are models. They rock a catwalk that's 60 feet long. It's a professional-sized catwalk.
We're talking models.
We're talking
fashion models.
Fashion models. They're kitted out in the best clothes. They strut their stuff. They're with celebrity escorts, from the Nuggets, from the Broncos, from everywhere. We have people from TV shows fly in from LA. We have famous singers come in. Natasha Bedingfield was there.
Quincy Jones was there.
Quincy Jones is our international spokesperson. I have to say, we couldn't do any of this without his magic. He just does this sprinkle magic dust on things, and things happen. And that's what you feel that night. You feel magic, you feel inspiration and joy. And a lot of fundraisers are interesting. You get a good meal, you get a drink.
You get the lecture.
You get the lecture, but you don't get the inspiration and the joy. And that's what our children and adults bring to the event.
What this event did was take mostly kids with Downs and turn them into superstars. I mean, they were fashion gods and goddesses, and you could tell they loved it. And you do this year, so you missed it for this year, so you're not going to go. But next year you need to do it.
Next year, October 12th,
October
2013.
You already have it planned?
We already have the date. Yeah.
God, I hate organized people. I despise you organized people.
To do this.
We've only got a few minutes left. I want to talk about Downs.
Is it half an hour already?
Like that,
Oh, that's terrible. Okay.
I want to talk about Downs and civil rights.
Oh, yeah,
and
definitely.
That we've come so far on civil rights when it comes to race and gender and now sexual orientation. When it comes to my son, he's still an outsider. And mind you,
painful.
It's painful It's a whole lot better than it was a decade ago, and that was a whole lot better than decades before. And you think throughout the time of history, our children would have been at best the village idiot, and now they're being integrated and they're being accepted, and the kids like them, and that's terrific. But is there equality? I mean, these are special needs people who are wonderful and the most loving I know, but their IQ is very low and
can be
very low, and they don't interact the same way.
Right, absolutely.
Is it a civil issue, civil rights issue?
I think it's two things, actually. It's a human rights issue and then a civil rights issue. So in terms of human rights, do I have the right to be free? And unfortunately, in the United States, you know, with the eugenics movement at the end of the 20th century and then moving into the early 1900s, a huge number of our children got institutionalized. They didn't get any education. They did not get any medical care in many cases. As Tim Shriver of the Special Olympics likes to say, they didn't even have the right to play because they weren't allowed outside. Some of these institutions didn't have plumbing. So it was like Warsaw, and you know, they died early, tragic, abused deaths. To me, the deinstitutionalization that happened in the United States was a human rights issue.
Where do we need to go? Tight on time. So tell me, from here forward, what needs to happen?
What needs to happen is the National Institutes of Health needs to fund research and medical care for our children with Down syndrome, and through school and early intervention, they should be able to reach their potential. They really should be able to do that. And of course, vote, go to public places, if they're able to drive, certainly get married. A lot of our kiddos are growing up to get married and having great relationships. They're so loving and wonderful a lot of the times. Again, the stereotype, you know, not all the time, you know, there are a lot of stereotypes.
Get my boy in a cranky mood.
Yeah, exactly.
What do people know, real quickly, take 10, 15 seconds, what is it that people need to know if they don't know anything about Downs and they run into a person with Downs?
Oh, that you just take your time, treat them like anybody else, and get to know them, just like you would anybody. First impressions are really meaningless.
And keep a hand on your wallet, because they're quick.
They're quick. They're quick. Subtle, quick.
They're quick.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, they're so cute, you don't even know that your purse is gone.
That's true. All right. Thank you
Michelle,
so
thank
much.
you so much.
Thank you.
The Global Down Syndrome Foundation, Google it and check it out. Listen for me on KHOW Radio on Sunday afternoons. Check out independenceinstitute.org. We'll see you next week.